Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Donal Finn. I am the chair for today's session, which we're doing in collaboration with the Institute of Refrigeration Ireland. We always have at least one event per year, and often we have them in June. So this is our event today. So I'm delighted to welcome our two speakers. The focus is around F-gases. So Seamus Kerr, who is a member of the Institute of Refrigeration Ireland and a past president, 2019-2020, and also Owen Reardon, technical advisor from the Department of the Environment, Climate and Communications. So this is our agenda. At the moment, I'm just really introducing and one slide on housekeeping, and then I'll hand over to our two speakers. And at the end, we'll have a Q&A session as well. And then we hope to close at the top of the hour at 2 o'clock. A little bit on housekeeping. You're all by default muted and offline as such at the moment. So if you have any questions to any of the presenters, you will see there's a questions tab there, which you can pose your questions. You've got to type them in. You can also use the chat function as well. If you have difficulty, you could possibly send it to this email address. We might be able to pick them up, but we'd really recommend that you use either the questions tab or the chat function. And afterwards, the presentation materials will be available. We'll put them on our website. And at the end of this talk, there's 3 short questions, a survey just to get some feedback. But I know Seamus also has 3 poll questions that he will pose to you as we go through the talk. Just like to bring to your attention that this Saturday, the 26th of June, is World Refrigeration Day. And I know Seamus will come back to this a little later. He's hoping to capture that, I guess, in a unique manner. So without any further ado, I will hand over to Seamus and Owen. The order will be as you see there. Now, Seamus is going to give an overview on the F-gas regulations, an update essentially, where we are and what happens next. And then Owen is going to focus more specifically on the actual regulations and the specific regulation in question. You can see it there, 517/2014, and give a review of that. So I'm going to hand over now to Seamus for his presentation. So this will just take a moment while I make Seamus our presenter. So hopefully that will happen without chance. And is that okay, Seamus?
Yeah, that's coming now, Donal, and just confirm that that's okay. You can see my screen.
Perfect. Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Good. Well, welcome everybody, and yet another online seminar, but we're delighted to have so many people joining us today as we do an update and a catch up on the F-gas regulations. Just my, I muted myself, but now I'm back. Got that. Yeah, just a quick word of thanks to our sponsors. So just these are the IRI sponsors, and then Donal will have a word of thanks later for the sponsors for ASHRAE. Just to summarize what we're doing today, so I'm just going to look at the F-gas regulation, which came in 2017, and just go through some of the main points and some of the to clarify some gray areas. And we see these gray areas here in the Institute because we get lots of questions about them. So I'd like to clarify them today. These notes are available for you to download. You'll actually see them on your screen there in the handouts. So you're welcome to download those and use them as you will. So today, we're going to look at dates. I'll talk a little bit about the phase down, a tiny little thing on training. Just going to clarify the definition, recycled, reclaimed, recovered, and bring some clarification to the multi-compressor system ban, which is a very important point. And then very, very short note on how are we getting on with the alternative refrigerants, and then a mention on new refrigerants. So this is the kind of the second tranche of F-gas regulations. It's a second version, and the current ones pretty much started in 2015 actually. So just the slide that you see at the minute, I'm picking up the the dates from January 2018. So we had our phase down in January 2018. Then in January 2020, we had an equipment ban for any of the high GWP refrigerants. So any refrigerant that has a GWP greater than 2,500, we're no longer allowed to put equipment in for that type of system. And there was also a ban on service of equipment with a refrigerant with a GWP greater than 2,500. If you're a refrigeration technician, you know that that's 404A and R507 and 442D. So those refrigerants are all, the virgin versions of them are banned in big systems. I'll show later that you can use them in a system that has less than approximately 10 kilos of refrigerant. If you just look at what I've underlined there, the phase down stage 4 happened at the start of this year, and I have a graph to show you about that. So, and that was a 45% reduction on the amount of refrigerant that is allowed to be imported into Europe. Then in the 1st of January 2022, which sounds like 100 years away, but it's actually a number of months away, there's a ban on multi-pack centralized refrigeration systems for commercial use. So that's any system that has greater than 40 kilowatts capacity and using a refrigerant greater than 150 GWP is banned. And this is in an area where what's considered as commercial use. Now that, to be honest, that ban frightened the life out of a lot of us, but there is a few little stipulations that take some of the worry out of it, and I'll be covering those in about 6 or 7 slides time. We will have another phase down in 2024, and you'll see that in the graph, another in 2027. In 2025, the refrigerants that you can use in your air conditioning units, the split air conditioning units, will be limited to refrigerants with a GWP of 750 or more. So that means you have to use something under 750. For example, R32 is one of the good runners for that, and we're using that already in our industry. And then the last one I've highlighted here is in January 2030, you won't be able to use the reclaimed refrigerant anymore. So that if the GWP is greater than 2,500, it's banned from January 2030. And it's a good point to clarify here. That means that anything else you're still allowed to use, albeit it's harder to get. There's less of it available. But for example, 407A, 448, 449, there's no limitation on them in the foreseeable future. So even after January 2030, we can use those refrigerants. So just to talk about the phase down, as you see, so in 2015, the European Commission took a figure and they looked at the imports into Europe of all refrigerants, and they called that 100% in 2015. Then in 2016, 2017, there was a 7% reduction. Didn't affect us too much, as I remember. Then we had a massive impact, if you remember, in 2018, when there was a big drop down to 63%. And that meant that the prices of refrigerant soared at the time, as I remember. And then the market balanced somewhat. And now this January, we've had another drop down to 45%. And I've just kind of showing you how much it's falling by. So as time goes on, there's less of the refrigerants that we're used to available. And so the GWP of individual refrigerants is getting lower and lower. High GWP refrigerants are basically leaving the market. Just to show you the average GWP of a refrigerant in 2015 was about 2,300 GWP value, or CO2 kilos equivalent. By now, in 2021, looking at the ban, if you forecast forwards, we should be using refrigerants at about 1035 if we want to use the same amount of refrigerant. But actually, we mostly use these days. We use 442A, 449A, 448A, and these have an average GWP of approximately 1,300. So if we go back to our slide here, we're about 300 GWP too high, so as we're on our journey towards a very low GWP refrigeration solutions. It's not a problem. We're still able to, there's still supply, but it just means that probably technology and development hasn't, for refrigerants, hasn't gone as fast as we would have liked it. The good side is we're starting to use a lot of alternative refrigerants, which aren't considered in this table. So for example, the CO2 and propane are becoming more and more popular, and ammonia somewhat as well. I just mentioned this before, just to talk about and I'll just show you here as with my mouse. The service ban, which is a 40-ton CO2 equivalent and greater than 2,500 GWP. That basically means you can't use for example, 404A in a system that has more than 40-ton CO2 equivalent. When we look at the mathematics of that, that means you can use virgin 404A in a 10 kilo system. So any small systems is still perfectly okay to use 404A, 422D, or 507. And then, of course, you can use reclaimed 404A, reclaimed 507 as much as you want. Tiny bit on certification, just a reminder from the F-gas regulations, it does say that any training that we're doing or that you're doing should include information on the alternative refrigerants or on the new technologies. So that's just a note that, so as we're training our personnel and technicians, we do need to talk to them about CO2 and propane and ammonia if they're going to be using it. Sorry for going so quickly, but this you'll have, at least you know where this information is now if you need to go and look for it. Karen, we'll do a quick poll, just we'll take a break in the middle because I'm just changing the topic. So Karen, if you want to run a poll, the first of them. Do I have to close my screen?
Can you see that poll there?
No, I'm seeing a no organizer. Am I the organizer?
Yes, Karen, I see it here, so I think it's visible for everyone.
I can see it now, Karen.
Okay.
So if you just want to, the poll is, which refrigerants do you use on your premises or in your installations? Mostly HFCs, mostly CO2, mostly ammonia, or a range of HFCs, CO2, and ammonia?
Okay, we've 79% voted. So you just tell me when you want to.
Yes, we'll look at the actually you can show that now, yes. So let's leave it for another 5 seconds or so. So anyone else wants to vote? Okay, Karen, you can close the poll. And do you want to show the results there, Karen?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Can you see that there?
Yes, it's visible to all.
Yep. Okay, it doesn't come on my screen, Karen, so you might give me the percentages there.
1%.
Okay. Mostly HFCs is 69%, CO2 5%, ammonia 3%, and a range of HFCs, CO2, and ammonia 23%.
Okay, that's very interesting. So still the major player in the refrigeration industry is the HFCs, as we would expect. But it's great to see such a high percentage starting on a blend of different refrigerants, which is what we would expect over the next few years. Okay, Karen, is my screen still there?
Yes, you have control there.
Great, thank you. So yeah, just I spoke a little bit about reclaimed refrigerant. So there's three definitions that are good to remember. One of them is the to recover refrigerant, and this basically means to put refrigerant in a cylinder. That might be for reuse. It might be for recycling.
Sorry, Seamus, cut across you. Sorry, we can't see your screen now.
Okay. Let's just have a look. And I think you'll have to, can you see me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Maybe just ask me to share it again. I think we've looked. And I'll leave the rest of the polls, I'll leave to the end.
Okay.
Yeah, that's great. Sorry everyone for that. So yes, to the term recover basically means put refrigerant in a cylinder. To recycle refrigerant means to extract the refrigerant with the intention to reuse. So this basically means that you, as a contractor or a technician, that you remove the refrigerant from a system. You might use an oil separator and a core dryer, and you clean it, and you're happy that it's suitable for reuse, and that's now termed as recycled refrigerant. Recycled refrigerant is still so you can use that again in a system under some rules, but the main thing is that you can reuse it. It's still considered as a waste refrigerant, so you can't sell it, but you can put it into another system. And there's two cases where you can use recycled refrigerant. One, if you take ownership as the contractor of the refrigerant, then you can actually put that refrigerant in another site of another customer that of yours, but the contractor is responsible for the refrigerant. If the owner of the refrigerant, for example, we'll call them Supermarket A, if Supermarket A take ownership of the refrigerant, they can then put it in any other premises or any other site belonging to Supermarket A, and they can use any contractor to do that. But they can't put it in, they can't give it to another company, shall we say. So that's the two. And of course, you must record every kilo that's recovered and reused. Then reclaimed refrigerant is refrigerant that is returned to its original quality. This is normally done by sending it, in our case in Ireland, we have to send it to the UK back to the facility where it is basically recycled completely or reclaimed, and then this can come back onto the market and be sold and bought and sold on the market, and that's referred to as reclaimed refrigerant. We do need some clarifications about quota post-Brexit, so there's some answers still to be there's some questions still to be answered on that. Then we move on to the multi-compressor system ban. So this is an important clarification. So in the F-gas legislation, it says that multi-pack centralized refrigeration systems for commercial use with a rated capacity of 40 kilowatts or more that contain or whose functioning relies upon fluorinated greenhouse gases with GWP of 150 or more. Ignore the next little bit, but and they're saying that they will be banned. So anything with 150 GWP or more in a multi-pack centralized system used for commercial use with a capacity of more than 40 kilowatts is banned. So to put that very simply, if you've got a 40 kilowatt system with more than one compressor, and you're using a refrigerant that has a GWP of more than 150, it's banned. Originally, we looked at that and thought that it meant that every compressor pack was banned, because there's very few refrigerants, especially if you're doing low temperature, that have a GWP of less than 150. But thankfully, we have some good news and some clarification. Both through IRI and other organizations, they asked the Commission to clarify what's a multi-pack centralized system, what does commercial use mean, and then just also a little bit of clarification: 40 kilowatts at freezing, chill, whatever. So so that was our questions: what's the definition of multi-pack, definition of commercial use, and a clarification on the 40 kilowatts. The Commission actually was released back in 2017. Just took me some time to find it. They produced an annex, and looking at the 2022 requirements for the F-gas regulations. So on the multi-pack centralized refrigeration system, it means the system with 2 or more compressors. There was some confusion in the industry that people were saying, well, 2 compressors is not multi, it's just 2. But anyway, that was an easy one to clarify. And then commercial use, and this is very important. So they say commercial use means for the storage, display, and dispensing of products for sale to end users in retail and food services. And they've been very clear then. They said this definition would therefore exclude storage facilities without sale to end users. So this is good news. It means that every pack is not banned. They're basically saying if you have a shop, now it's not good news for supermarkets and retailers, but it means if you have a shop, if you have somewhere where the public can purchase goods, then you must obey the new January 2022 regulation. And if you have a facility where you can't purchase goods, where the public can't purchase goods, for example, a wholesale storage facility, and then that's okay. You can continue just obeying the other rules of the F-gas regulations. And then just a clarification on the 40 kilowatt refrigeration, it's 40 kilowatts at -10 for chill and 40 kilowatts at -35 for freezer temperature. And just coming near the end now, just a very few, just again to look at the landscape of GWP. So R23 and R508B, these are used less and less. They haven't been replaced yet because there's no alternatives. They've massive GWP, up to 14,000. The 404As and the 507s in the virgin form are much less used now. The most popular refrigerants are here: 407, 442A, 449, 448, and they're all below the 2,500, but still quite high. So as time goes on, we're going to have to get into this area here, which is below the 1,000, and I've just marked it as 750. Some new refrigerants coming all the time. There's a brand new one now at 292 GWP. It's a non-flammable A1 refrigerant. It's an R134A replacement. I haven't seen it on the market yet, but it's on its way. And then we have the old favorite 1234YF, which is still available. And then the alternative refrigerants, I said I'd mention them just to say that we're seeing a lot more CO2 in the market. The service technicians and contractors are becoming a lot more comfortable and with using CO2. It still we're dealing with very high pressures, design pressures of 120 bar, which are massive pressures for a gas. But people are being careful, people are doing training, and we're seeing good green solutions. And then we're also seeing a lot more small propane and butane systems being used. They're still regulated by the maximum charge limitation, which is for in a shop, for example, is 1.5 kilos charge allowed per system. Just to very quickly point you towards, there's a technical bulletin available from IRI, just to talk about the service bans and product prohibitions. The F-gas regulation is currently under review. IRI, who I'm involved with, are doing some work on that. The main thing, the change that we'll see is IRI are proposing a mandatory certification for alternative refrigerants. So they're basically saying, not only do we want you to be trained in CO2 or propane or butane, but we actually want you to be trained and certified to certain standards, which will be very important from a safety point of view. And that is the end of my presentation. Karen, we might do our quick World Refrigeration Day Photoshop. So, World Refrigeration Day, La Kirsten and Dawn, if you wanted to ask Gelka, is actually Kelvin's birthday. Kelvin was born in 1824 in Belfast on the 26th of June. William Thompson, Lord Kelvin, and he's one of the most famous thermodynamic experts, and did lots of contributed to this industry a lot. And so there was an organization set up which celebrates his birthday and promotes refrigeration on that day. So what we're hoping to do is, I think Karen will let you turn your camera on. If you're happy to do that, do. And if you have your little World Refrigeration sign, you can hold it up like that. But again, if you, and we'll probably just send this to the guys in World Refrigeration just to show our support to them. If you're not comfortable turning on your camera, please feel free not to.
If anybody can confirm if they have an option to turn on their camera, I don't know whether this allows, unless you are basically an organizer or a panelist. I know Zoom is different. Yeah.
Well,
so I don't know whether there is an option.
That's okay. Then, without further ado, we will move on. So, yeah,
okay, I just see them coming back. Sorry, Decc. I see a couple of them come back. There's no camera option on this.
That's okay. All right, it was a good idea. Well, moving on, I'm going to hand over the presentation to Owen Reardon. I'm going to have a little. So Owen is with the DECC, which is the Department of Environment, Climate and Communications. He's a technical policy advisor in the Department of the Environment, and Owen has been a great help to the Institute, giving us some advice, especially around the Brexit question and around the F-gas regulation. So without further ado, Owen, I'll hand over to you. I'm not sure, did you get your camera working, Owen?
Thanks, Seamus. No, I've had an offer on the screen to share it a few times, and every time I click share, nothing happens. So
okay.
I don't know, right, happy enough to proceed with just my three cartoons.
Yes, proceed, and we can see your presentation perfectly, so we'll work with that.
Okay. I actually went to the bother today of putting on an iron shirt for the first time in about 6 months, so I didn't need to do that even.
Thank you for that.
Anyway, so as Seamus says there, my name's Owen Reardon. I work as a technical advisor in the Department of Environment, Climate and Communications, and I advise our policy people, among other things, on matters to do with F-gases and ozone depleting substances. I took over the role kind of late last year from, maybe some of you would have had contact with Errol Close or with Jean Clark before him again. So they're the colleagues in our area of the department. So Seamus's last slide there was kind of a nice segue into mine. There's a review of the current F-gas regulation going on at the moment, and we can expect a new regulation possibly by the end of this year, or more likely probably at some stage next year. Just very brief bit of background. F-gases, obviously you all know, are used in refrigeration and other areas too. They were introduced initially as a substitute for ozone depleting substances like CFCs. And they don't deplete ozone, so they're very positive from that point of view. but it became clear later on that they are very powerful greenhouse gases, which is a problem from the point of view of climate change. So they fixed the ozone problem, but it is added to the climate problem. Their emissions in the EU rose by 60%, sorry, since 1990. Apologies there, I've just lost my screen 1 second. Yeah, since 1990. So the first F-gas regulation came in 2006. That succeeded in stabilizing the emissions at 2010 levels. And then the next F-gas regulation, that's the current one, 517 of 2014, aimed to cut EU emissions by 2/3 compared to 2014 levels. Quite a lot in that regulation, but the two main tools to cut the emissions are, firstly, the control of quantities allowable on the market, that's the quota system. And secondly, then the training and certification requirements designed to control unintentional leaks during the lifetime and during service and maintenance and all that. Now, of course, that regulation preceded a lot of recent developments on climate policy at a European level and at a global level, actually, for that matter. So you've got the Paris Climate Agreement, the Kigali Amendment to the Montreal Protocol, which concerns HFCs, the European Green Deal, and some recent developments in European climate law, which aim for climate neutrality by 2050 and by a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by at least 55% by 2030. That's compared with 1990 levels. All those things considered, the Commission decided that a review of the current regulation was to be carried out by the end of this year. So late last year, they launched a study firstly to assess the performance of the current regulation, and secondly to present objectives for the revision of the regulation and assess the impact of any envisaged policy options. So the current regulation, apologies by the way, my slides are a bit wordy, so I'm going to kind of skip over a lot of them, but you have the slides anyway, so you can read through them in more detail at a later stage if you want. So regarding the performance of the regulation to date, it was assessed under 5 criteria. The first was its effectiveness. And in general, it was given a fairly effective, a reasonably good score in that the supply of HFCs has declined significantly. We've had a steady increase in reclamation of F-gases. Prevention of leakage from equipment has obviously improved hugely. It's also been a strong trigger for innovation and promoting investment in natural refrigerants. But there are some other areas where it's not so effective. Like, so we may not meet the 2030 targets. There are not the F-gas reg itself now, but there are some unjustified barriers to the use of climate-friendly alternatives in safety codes especially to do with flammable refrigerants and that. And it is generally agreed that there's an insufficient number of service personnel qualified to install equipment with climate-friendly alternatives in it. It was also assessed from the point of view of efficiency. Again, given a fairly good score in that very significant emission savings for very low abatement cost. Under the heading of relevance, it seemed to be very relevant, but needs to be kind of brought up to speed with more recent EU climate policy and also with changes to the Montreal Protocol. Coherence was seen to be good, but again, kind of a must-do better score, if you like. And under the heading of general EU added value, again, a fairly good score. So that was the assessment of the regulation to date. Then what policy options will be considered for the next regulation? So 4 review objectives are identified, one of which is raising ambition in line with the European Green Deal, 2, better alignment with Montreal Protocol, then 3 is improved implementation and enforcement. You can have all the policy documents and all the regulation in the world, but if the implementation and enforcement is too unwieldy or just not working, then obviously that diminishes the effectiveness of the regulations. And so a very, very long list of potential policy options under those 3, and sorry, there was an objective D then for kind of miscellaneous. So a very long list of policy options was put together under those headings, and they were assessed under how feasible they'd be and how effective they'd be, both from a legal and an enforcement and a general point of view. And then a much shorter list of policy options was put together under those 4 headings, A, B, C, and D. So I'll give you a very quick overview here of what's currently being considered. And I just want to stress that all of these things are just what are being looked at. Nothing has been decided now. At the moment, they're just going through a whole lot of impact assessments and costings and all that type of thing. So under the objective A of raising the ambition in line with the Green Deal, that's kind of broken into 2 subheadings. One is to increase the HFC phase down ambition. And Seamus showed a chart earlier which shows the phase down up to 2030. So they may look to increase that phase down. It's pretty aggressive as it is. As Seamus showed, we're down at 45% of the original levels already. So they may look to increase that a bit more. But then secondly, of course, post 2030, at the moment, there's no phase down schedule in place. So they will put in a phase down schedule for that. The second aspect of Objective A is about prohibiting F-gases in products or equipment where those gases are seen to be no longer needed. So I just put down a couple of examples there. In personal products containing F-gases like creams and mousses and foams and things like skin coolers used in beauty shops. Those types of things are being looked at. Objective B, is about seeking better alignment with the Montreal Protocol. So that would again cover a new phase down beyond 2030. It would also look to remove some exemptions and thresholds that are not in the Montreal Protocol. That could include the thresholds for placing on the market and for reporting, which exist in the F-gas regulation. And then thirdly, it will look at a separate phasing down of HFC production. So we already have a HFC phase down for supply on the market, but this will look at a HFC production phase down as well. And then the third area that is being looked at, our third policy area, is Objective C, improving implementation and enforcement. The first thing, Seamus mentioned this as well, is to do with the certification of technicians to include skills on the use of low global warming alternatives. Secondly, then, from the point of view of customs and surveillance, better surveillance at a European level. This is for for revenue, the EPA as well, and their counterparts in the other member states. Just all around better surveillance at a European level. Better market controls about various operators and illegal trade and legitimate operators and all that kind of thing. And then finally, more comprehensive monitoring. So that will include additional or improved reporting on the use of HFCs. And it will probably also involve new substances being added to Annex 1 or Annex 2, or maybe even some substances that are currently in Annex 2 being moved to Annex 1. So, of course, as I mentioned back in my first slide, HFCs were brought in as an alternative to CFCs, but at a later stage it was found out that HFCs have their own problem. The science in these things changes all the time, and chemicals that might have been brought in 5 years ago, it's only after they come on the market that problems become available with them. So that's why this new substance is being added to the annexes is something that will be looked at for the new regulation. It will probably also look to make the annexes a bit more dynamic, that they could be updated during the lifetime of the regulation. So I think that's it. That's a very, very high level and very, very quick outline of what's being looked at for the new regulation. As I said, these are just being evaluated at the moment for their impact, their cost, their feasibility, and so forth. But we should have more concrete ideas towards the end of the year, I think, on what's likely to be in the next regulation. So that's the end of my presentation, Seamus.
Thank you very much, Owen. That's great. Donald, do you want to say a few words?
Thank you, Seamus, and thank you both Seamus and Owen for your very interesting presentations. We have a few questions. First of all, just one clarification. It seems, Seamus, that the version of your slides that are uploaded for people to download, there's some important details truncated off the PDF document. So we, to that question, we will address that. We'll see if we can even address it in the next 5 or 10 minutes. If not, The two presentations will, I guess, be on both the ASHRAE and IRI websites later today. Now,
just on that, I've sent through a fresh copy, so Karen will pop it into the handouts now.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Now we have a few questions, so let me start with the first question. It's from Eamon Merriman, and I think it's probably to you, Seamus. So Eamon observes, first of all, the EPA notes, the Environmental Protection Agency, that both reclaimed and virgin HFCs imported to the EU from a third country, including GB, unless for exempted use as described by Article 15.2 of the F-gas regulations, EU Regulation 517/204 will require EU HFC quota. So that's a very, very specific question. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, I suppose we were waiting on clarification for that, so that's good. I might do something. We will probably release something from the Institute of Refrigeration about that, but it's I suppose my reaction to it would be, so then basically to clarify, so basically what it's saying is if you want to import reclaimed refrigerant from the UK or anywhere outside EU, you're going to need to use quota. Which makes sense, but it means it will limit the availability of reclaimed refrigerant in Ireland because there's not a lot of quota in Ireland. So that's going to be now, but there will be ways around that. So I won't answer it all today, but I'll be in touch with Eamon just to clarify, and I appreciate the clarification to date, Eamon. I suppose what I'll have to do is on behalf of industry, we'll have to find a solution that works because reclaimed will be very important when virgin refrigerant starts to become less available. Thanks, Donald.
Okay, thank you, Seamus. Now we have another question. It's from Marcus Levy. And I think it's probably to you as well, Seamus, so why did you not include refrigerants R454C and R455A being applied today as A2L alternatives to R404A?
Can I plead ignorance? Yes, I'm not familiar with them. So there's a plethora of new refrigerants available, and as they become available and popular, we become aware of them. So I just wasn't aware of those yet. So again, Marcus, I appreciate the heads up on them. But yes, so there's a lot of good and very useful new refrigerants coming on the market.
And our next question, and I think it's the final question at the moment, it's from Declan Fitzmaurice. So the HFO refrigerant R1234ZD is a good refrigerant for centrifugal chillers, but has an ODP of 0.00034, which is very low, but is not zero. In relation to ODP regulations, what is the legal position on the use of this refrigerant in new chillers?
Owen, would you know the answer to that, or do you want me to?
I don't know. I'd have to look into that one.
Yeah. It's a good question. So it's basically because it's virtually zero ODP, but of course it's not zero. It's got a very even though it's somewhat very low. So I'm not sure legally what's on that. So I'll check that out, Declan, and we'll come back to you on it.
Great. Thank you, Seamus. I don't see any more questions at the moment, so I think at this point we'll close the session. So again, let me just share my final 1 or 2 slides, and let's hope this works without a glitch. Let me put it into presentation mode. Not quite working, but I think you can see the let's say the off mode. Just bear with me for one moment if I one more go at this. Right, so let's see how that goes. But in any case, First of all, thanks to the two presenters again today, and I think you've brought everyone up to date, and also from Owen, I think you gave us an idea of what's coming down the line and also the complexity of the discussion as well, and that was quite evident in the various scenarios that you mapped out there and the discussion that's going on at European level. So thank you all for joining us. I'd ask you, if possible, to keep in touch both with ourselves as ASHRAE Ireland chapter, but also with the IRI. We both have mutual interests, and I know within the ASHRAE agenda, the whole area of refrigeration, that is the R in the ASHRAE, so it's very central and fundamental to ASHRAE. I would like in particular to thank our sponsors and supporters. You can see the list of the companies who support us. Without your support, we wouldn't be able to do the work that we do, and we really do appreciate it, because it's really important, both financially, but also in terms of the richness and diversity which you bring to the organization, and also our collaboration with CIPSI and Engineers Ireland and Building Services News as well. So that brings me to close. So thank you all for joining us. We will make the latest versions of the presentations available on both of our websites. And once again, thanks both to Seamus and to Owen for their very, very informative and I guess topical talks. So thank you. So I'll hand back to Karen, who will close out and finish this session.
Thank you very much, Donal. And on behalf of the IRA, it's great to work together. So it's, thank you for that. Just to let people know that that new version of the PDF is now available in the handout section. Yeah, just from the Institute of Refrigeration point of view, we have our next seminar will be in September, best practice on pipe installation, and then we have a seminar in October, the introduction to EU standards for display cabinets. So you'll see all that on our websites. And maybe log on at some stage to World Refrigeration Day and give them a little bit of support, either through LinkedIn or the other social media platforms that they use. So thank you very much, everyone. Karen, you can close us down.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks all. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks, Owen.